Hey everybody, my name is Mike Petraglia, Trags. I am joined as always after a Bengals game by Richard Skinny of Local 12 and Local12.com. This is the Jungle War Skinny Bengals postgame pod following, how do I put this into words? An epic, a memorable, an unforgettable, a surreal, as T. Higgins said multiple times Saturday night, after a 30-24 overtime win by the Bengals over the Denver Broncos, keeping, I don't know if we want to call it faint playoff hopes alive anymore, Skinny. There are a few things that still need to happen, but the Bengals are relevant going into Week 18, and at 4-8, I don't think a lot of people thought they would be relevant going to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it felt like that stretch of Baltimore Chargers at the end of before the bye was still one of those, preferably the Chargers, because that was the team you're going to probably have to have the tiebreaker with.
Right.
We all thought Baltimore was going to probably ascend to being the division champ or in the mix with Pittsburgh, which they are, and they're going to go to the last week for that. Yeah, I thought at 4-8 they could get to 8-8. I didn't know if that would leave them relevant enough for the playoffs, and yet here it is. And there's a lot of stuff that has to happen to your point. I mean, Indy's got 2 easy wins in theory, but they're playing now with Joe Flacco at quarterback. Miami doesn't have 2 easy wins, and suddenly they're without Tua. And Kansas City doesn't have to play its starters. They don't owe the Bengals anything. At the same time, is Andy Reid really going to sit a lot of his guys for 25 days? That's going to be the time period between the day they played on Christmas and the time they will play their first playoff game.
Right.
So it doesn't mean he's going to play them the whole time, but could he play a significant enough of those guys to take a 17-3 lead over Denver and go, okay, now here we go. Let's coast this thing home, which they've had some weird wins too. But back to your original question, I don't know how to phrase this game, Mike. I wrote so many leads on this game of the tie, the loss, the ugly loss, the crazy win, Joe Burrow scored a touchdown with 1:30 whatever left to give the Bengals the win. So I don't know how to phrase this because this has been a season where every one of these games that has gone this way has gone against the Bengals. And yet somehow tonight, despite Cade York hitting the upright, and it felt like that was the moment of, okay, this is how this season's supposed to end, to Denver literally going, we're just going to run out the clock, and that's it. We only need a tie. Because that's all they needed, Mike. They only needed a tie to clinch. And the Bengals defense, I didn't do the math enough to know if they hadn't gotten a 3-and-out, if there had been enough time to get the ball back and go kick a field goal. I really didn't. But they got a 3-and-out, and then suddenly it's like, don't give Joe Burrow another chance, guys. He's been too hot tonight. You got him the last series. You ain't getting him again, and they didn't. And he has just been – it's so absurd what we're watching. I don't think people even understand what we're watching. He's just been ridiculous. 8 straight games now of 250 yards plus. And I soft shoe that because he threw for over 400 tonight and 3 touchdowns in the same game. He set the record last week with 7. He's extended it now to 8. That is an NFL record. That is Bart Starr, Joe Namath, Roman Gabriel. I don't care who you want to name. Name every quarterback you can name. Tom Brady, for goodness sakes. Your guy. No one else has done that, and now he's exceeded it by 2. It's crazy.
And he's thrown at least 3 touchdowns in 8 straight games.
Yeah,
he is 2
crazy.
away from Tom Brady's record.
Right.
And I don't know if that record would extend into next season.
It does. It does, because Dan Marino was part of that. And Joe has surpassed. Dan had 7. Joe surpassed that tonight. He tied it last week, and I did look. Dan Marino's did extend over two seasons. So yes, it does extend over 2 seasons.
All right, we're going to talk a lot about Joe Burrow, but I think the biggest storyline a lot of fans are going to take away from this game is see how important T. Higgins is to the offense. Not 1, not 2, 3 touchdowns. All 3 of Joe Burrow's touchdown passes were caught by T. Higgins. T. Higgins had 131 yards receiving, 11 receptions on 12 targets. He did have the one fumble that could have cost the Bengals big time, and I know you asked T in the scrum after the game about that, but the game that T. Higgins had, I think, proved his true ultimate worth to this Bengal team in a game you absolutely, positively had to have. you can't double both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins late. The Broncos couldn't. And Joe Burrow made a perfect throw, and T. Higgins made the catch of the game, the 32-yarder down the left sideline. How do you characterize what T. Higgins called a surreal game for himself? How do you surmise that, and how do you summarize that, Skinner?
So obviously Denver plays a defense in which they do a lot of 5-man, multiple pressure, sometimes 6-man, sometimes 7-man. And they're relying on their corners, who one is Patrick Surtain, who's terrific, as we know, to cover one-on-one. And that's great in most circumstances. It's not great against this team because Jamar Chase is going to win one-on-ones. Not every time against Patrick Surtain. I watched a bunch of plays just isolated on watching those two battle. I'm like, wow, this is fun to watch. And you're not going to win. Riley Moss is just coming off of the injured list or off whatever. He hadn't played for a while. And he's right. The other corner. He's really good, but he's just coming off of an injury. And so you're asking him to then cover one-on-one. And, okay, you want to maybe slide a little coverage to those guys? Well, then you got to go one-on-one with Mike Gesicki, and you got to go one-on-one with Andre Yoshavash. And so this was an interesting matchup from that perspective of Denver plays a weird defense where they're going to send more guys. They're trying to get one-on-ones in pass rush and say, we're going to beat you to the quarterback before your quarterback can get it out. Well, there's not many quarterbacks like Joe Burrow that can get it out. And so he did find the one-on-one matchups, and he did make them pay for that. You know, hang on, Mike, I got the stats. I mean, it was T with 11, Gesicki with 10, Jamar with 9, Andre with 3 for 59, and let's not forget, he also had a 50-yard touchdown reception called back by an illegal motion penalty on Gesicki, or he'd have been over 100. So they made them pay for those things. And that's where this matchup felt like it was a win for the Bengals because you're not going to blitz. You're not going to pressure Joe Burrow. They got him a few times, right? I mean, he was sacked 4 times, 3 times, 7 times. I'm sorry. It was worse than I thought. I didn't realize it was 7 times. But it was only for 28 yards, so it wasn't a lot of stuff. So you're going to get him a few times, but he's going to get you more times. And if you're only getting him for 28 yards and losses, you ain't getting it for deep stuff. You're not putting him in 2nd and 17. You're putting him in 2nd and 12, 3rd and 9. And he's going to make you pay for those things. And so back to your original question about T, you can't cover these guys one-on-one. You just can't. The only thing for T is, and I think we'd all agree with this, and I think this is the yin and the yang of where this conversation goes. So the column I just got done writing is he put an exclamation point on the following: how good he is, and how much the Bengals can either pay him because of how good he is, or an exclamation point on this was it for him. This is the last home game he's going to play as a Bengal because they're not going to be able to pay him. And they have to decide, is T. Higgins for 12 games worth it? Is T. Higgins for roll the dice that he might give you 16, 15, 14 games worth it? Or is it just he doesn't play enough to have us pay him? It's a weird spot because there's no question when the guy plays, Mike, nobody doubts his performance level.
So here's my answer to that. What you're paying for is an elite receiver next to Jamar Chase. And if you're going to be rebuilding your defense over the next 2 to 3 years, and you still want to give Joe Burrow the chance to compete, to get to the playoffs, and then once you get to the playoffs, I believe with Joe Burrow, anything is possible.
Absolutely.
There are others who don't believe that. But with this team, if Joe Burrow gets to the playoffs this year, I'm not going to say they're going to, win 3 straight road games and get to the Super Bowl, but I wouldn't put it past them to get to the AFC title game if they get to the playoffs.
Hey, Mike, I guarantee you Buffalo would sit there and go, because they're the 2 seed in theory. Let's just play it out.
Right.
You can't. They're the 2 seed.
Sure.
The Bengals will be the 7th. I guarantee you there's nobody in Buffalo that wants them to come to their place because guess what the Bengals do at the moment? Whether it's small sample size or not, they own the Bills. They do. Not sure they own them this year or will, but they own them. Playoffs, regular season, they own them. You think Buffalo's going to sit there and go, gosh, we got Joe Burrow coming here. Oh, what a layup. No, they know it's not a layup. They own them at the moment.
Well, I think that's a fascinating point. And, T. Higgins after the game said something very interesting to me. He said that, yes, it's a surreal moment. The night that I had, I'm aware that it could be my last game in stripes, as he put it.
Yep.
And that meant something to me. That meant a little bit more to me. And, in those words, I thought he was at least acknowledging the possibility he may not be back next year. And he knows the finances are the finances of the NFL and the way the Bengals do their finances, not like other teams. The model is out there, and I've said this before. You've said this before. The Miami Dolphins model, the Philadelphia Eagles model, where you can keep 2-star receivers approaching or over 9-figure contracts. I don't know if the Bengals are going to go there, even for a guy like T. Higgins.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say to that, and I've gone on the other side of that of honestly saying I'm not sure that they'll pay T, but the point being, if you look at this roster currently, I think they tried to be preemptive, right, in some of this stuff. I mean, Andre is a 6th-round pick. That was a wild card. That's a roll of the dice wild card. The kid's become an okay player. He's not great. He's become an okay player. But you thought Charlie Jones or Jermaine Burton would be a guy to show you something, and neither one has done anything to this point. And in theory, in a perfect world, Charlie Jones showed you enough to go, there's our slot guy. And Jermaine Burton's had shown you enough to go, that's our replacement for T. And we'll pay for Jamar because we're going to have to pay for Jamar. And we're going to have to pay him a lot of guaranteed money. They haven't. And so then you have to look and go, to your point, there's a lot we have to do on defense. And it's going to probably cost some money and or draft capital. And maybe it is draft capital, the point where you go, all right, by God, we got our quarterback. We've got our running back. And hopefully Chase Brown is healthy after tonight, whatever that becomes. He'll be healthy by next year. We have our running back. Go get Mike Gesicki for another year as your backup tight end, or as your tight end, and you got Drew Sample under contract and Tanner Hudson probably, and when Eric All comes back, you're good there. You got your right tackle, you got your center still. You've got enough parts to where you look and go, we have 3 stars on offense, and by God, we're going to pay them. In theory, there's a part of me that goes, it was a different time and place. Well, Dan Fouts had Charlie Joyner and Wes Chandler, and Charlie Joyner and John Jefferson, and Dan Marino had Mark Duper and Mark Clayton. What did those teams do with all that firepower and Hall of Fame quarterbacks and all those things? They didn't do a damn thing. They got to some playoff stuff and all that, and Dan Marino got to a Super Bowl. Fouts never did. And then part of me thinks, do you want to go that route? Well, there's a part of me that says, in today's NFL, maybe you have to go that route. And especially after tonight, the problem, though, for T is, how much do you worry that I'm going to pay him and he's going to get hurt and we're not going to get the production we want? I think that's a fair argument if you're the Bengals management to go, love him, love everything about him, but if I'm only getting 10 games out of him, is it really worth it for us?
See, I just think that the money that they could spend on defense, I'm not sure is going to fix all of their problems.
Maybe not, and that's fair.
And I would rather bring back the 2 players I know right now can help Joe Burrow going forward. And you're getting them in their early prime. You're not paying for them at 30 years of age. You're paying for them in their mid-20s. That would be my argument, and that would be my answer. I want to dissect this game.
Yeah, real quick, Mike, to that point. And the fact of what Joe said to us after the Dallas game, it's clear that he wants T. Higgins back. It's almost like he told management, guys, this is my guy. I need to have him back. I'm talking this into fruition. You make it work. And tonight, like I said, it was the exclamation point of one of 2 things. Last game is a Bengal, or management goes, Joe's right. We got to pay the guy.
Well, after the game, and he was Joe Burrow's 3rd question in, walk us through the sideline throw to T. Higgins in overtime that set up the game winner. We've been throwing it short on them, 10-yard stops. We've been completing some of those. So we were waiting for the right moment to take our shot there. What a great catch by T. T came up big. He was unbelievable today. There were so many moments in that game, Skinny, that stand out. And we've already talked about that sideline throw. But the Cade York missed field goal. For the defense to step up and get a 3-and-out, I know you already mentioned this, the Jermaine Pratt interception after the T. Higgins fumble, another huge moment in that game. That set up the Joe Burrow quarterback sneak with just under 2 minutes to go that gave the Bengals the 24-17 lead. Defense couldn't hold them. They allowed that 4th and 1 completion of Marvin Mims of whatever it was, 25 yards.
Yeah, 25.
25 yards on 4th and 1 with 8 seconds to go for the touchdown. Geno Stone in back, Mike Hilton in front. And I thought for a second there was a chance that ball might have been ruled incomplete, but the evidence on replay was inconclusive, so the call stood. There were just so many emotions, swings, wild swings in that game. For the Bengals to hang in there, I thought showed some character. I really did.
No.
I know that gets overused a lot, Skinny, but in this particular instance, I think it applies.
No question. I mean, let's go back to the end of regulation where they give up the touchdown and then they win the coin toss. And then it's the emotion of, okay, we all know the rules. Go down and score a touchdown, game's over.
Right.
And they have to punt. They hadn't punted in they hadn't punted in regulation, and somehow they went to overtime, which is just crazy to me. But they had to punt. And then the defense had to get a stop, and it did. Okay. Defense gets a stop, and here we go. Drive it down. Cade York field goal. Bang off the upright. Chip Lohmiller, Washington, 1988. You and I talked about that in the locker room, which is the craziest play I've ever been around. Man, I was a kid then and was there with my dad, and I still remember hearing the boing, and it had the same sound tonight. You're like, this is the way this season's going to end. And then all Denver has to do is literally run out. They don't have to score. They have to run out the clock to force a tie. They get a tie. They clinch the playoff berth. That's it. Indy's done. Miami's done. Bengals are done. They have to get – so the defense, maybe if they don't get that stop, they get the 3 and out, they might have a little wiggle room, but you're not going to get the ball back with much. They get the 3 and out after giving up a touchdown drive that they have no business giving up at the end of regulation, yet they did. And yet they get 2 3 and outs or 2 punts in the overtime period, the last being a 3 and out. And then the offense went, yep, we're good. You gave us one more chance, and they did. And it is really amazing to watch that, especially in the season where this has gone so haywire so many times, and yet you found a way to win this.
Before I forget,
yep,
Jamar Chase, when we were talking to T. Higgins,
I know what you're going to say. I remember this is great.
Yelled out, pay him. And I want to make sure we get that in there because I thought it was kind of a seminal moment of that post-game scrum with T. And as you heard, I tried in vain to ask T. Higgins about hearing that kind of support publicly from Jamar Chase in the wake of –
I'm going to leave it alone.
I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not going to talk about negotiating. Yep. And you know what? Good for T for kind of letting that be, savor the win, not talk contract at this point. Because, obviously T knows that Jamar loves him.
No question.
And Jamar, there's not an ounce of jealousy. That's one of the things to me, Skinny, that makes the relationship between T. Higgins and Jamar Chase so special. Yeah, maybe they're divas. Every wide receiver in the NFL.
I don't think they are. I think they're different in their own ways. To your point, I don't think they are, Mike. I really don't. I would clearly say if I believe that.
Yeah, well, that's to me their relationship, their respect for one another, and the fact that T. Higgins could have all 3 touchdown grabs, and Jamar's like, I love it. I love it. I'm all about winning. Yes, the numbers are great, but the wins are more important to me. And that's what Jamar essentially said and told us after the game.
Yeah, I thought that was – it's funny because I was talking to Jermaine Pratt for a little bit tonight about his interception and the defense, all that stuff, and I really didn't write what he talked about because T was such a story, so I wrote that. But I wasn't in on the Jamar scrum, and it was a crazy scrum. There might have been 50 people around him, it felt like, for goodness sakes. So when you asked him that question, I went, oh, that's pretty funny that he actually said that. And to T's credit, he didn't take the bait. You weren't baiting him. I don't mean that way. It was, I think he just realized I'm not going to do this now. But I thought it was a great question. I'm like, oh, this will be an interesting answer. And he didn't give us an interesting answer, which was disappointing. But that goes back to where we're at with this. And to the other part of, they haven't paid Jamar either. So this offseason, and we're still a game yet to go, a relevant game yet to go, this offseason is going to be nuts to see what they do with these 2 guys in particular and with the rest of the roster to fix it. Because, listen, you're 8-8. Even if you snuck in, you're still an imperfect roster. There's still a lot of things you got to do to be better. But I can't believe where we were out of the bye week, because I had just basically gone, I thought they had a shot just because of the schedule and the way it shaped out, but I'd kind of cashed it in. And here we are going to Pittsburgh, Mike. We're going to Pittsburgh with relevant football. It's insane.
Okay, before we get to the Joe Burrow numbers, which were astronomical, and we promoted that earlier in the pod, we have to talk about Orlando Brown Jr.
Mm-hmm.
The man, as we like to do, we stand behind a barricade as the players come in to the Bengal locker room, and tonight they walked in winners, as I like to call it. They walk in winners. There were two moments that stood out to me. Cam Taylor-Britt jumping on the shoulders of T. Higgins, saying, "You're the effing man. You're the effing best." That was awesome. Made for great video. I have that up on the YouTube page as well as on my X page at Trags, Trags.
Hey, Trags, you better be on an X page for that kind of language, by the way.
Yes, it is, Skinny. Well played, by the way. But also, it was Orlando Brown Jr. walking in saying he's playing on an effing broken leg and in two places. And we're all like, what? I mean, we knew that he had some issues with the femur right below the knee and he was playing through some pain. He then cooled off with a big smile on his face and his son by his side in front of his locker stall and said, "Yeah, what happened is when I was younger, I grew too fast. My tibia and my femur, tibia and my fibula.
Yep.
Thank you. Fused together. And because of that, it made the bone in certain places brittle.
Oh my
and
Lord.
He was, he's averse, or what's the word I'm looking for? He's prone to having bone breaks right below the knee, and sure enough, that's what happened this year. I believe it happened, in the Philadelphia Eagles game when he tried to come back, injured it there, and he's been trying to play through that pain. Only 2 games. This was only his second game in the last 7 weeks that he's played, but he realized the importance of it. And it was just fascinating to hear Orlando Brown Jr. talk about the kind of pain he's playing through. And it really shows why the Bengals look up to him as one of their team captains.
It's insane, Mike. So he got hurt in the Cleveland game initially in the first half, went out. It was ruled a knee injury initially. And then during the week, we find out it's knee/fibula. Oh, okay. And then he tries to play in the Philly game and can't finish it. Goes out the first half, and it's listed as knee/fibula. And then as time goes on, it's listed as fibula. And then you remember, he came back and tried to play the Pittsburgh game because he missed the Baltimore game and he missed the Charger game. And he came back to try to play Pittsburgh. And I still remember a toss sweep to the left, Chase Brown. And he is literally dragging a leg, trying to pull and make a block. And Paul Dehner Jr. sits next to me. I go, this is ridiculous. I mean, he can't play. I mean, God love him for trying. And he finished the game, and then soon after, then he missed a stretch of games. And here he is tonight playing on that. I mean, he's a big man. He's 6'8", 340 pounds. And if that stuff isn't stable, it's not going to work. And you want to know about a guy who loves football? That's all you need to know. It doesn't make it right. It almost makes it crazy, in my opinion, that you're going to go, I don't care. My leg's broken or it's broken enough and I'm still going to play. If you can't admire that, I'm not sure what you can admire. You can also disdain it and go, what an idiot because he's playing hurt, part of the NFL. For him to do that and still play at a high level is just insane to me. And they needed him tonight because don't forget, Amarius Mims got hurt. Devin Cochran had to go in. And I'm not trying to besmirch anybody, but could you imagine against this 5-man pass rush, maybe 6-man pass rush of Devin Cochran playing a tackle spot, Cody Ford playing a tackle spot, and Cordell Volson having to go in because they've yanked him at guard, playing the left guard spot? Good luck with that.
Well, and that is just what the Bengals were up against had Orlando Brown Jr. not been able to go tonight. So it just shows the kind of character he has and why he was elected a team captain, because he realizes he needs to lead. And the best way to lead, of course, when you play in the NFL is to be on the field. Now for Joe Burrow, Skinny.
Yep.
His first answer in the post-game press conference. How are you feeling after that one? Tired. If anybody deserves to be tired after that game, it's Joe Burrow. He was hit numerous times. He was sacked, as you mentioned earlier, 7 times by a ferocious Denver pass rush, which now leads the NFL with 58 sacks on the season. But Joe Burrow's numbers are astounding. 39 of 49, 412 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, a passer rating, quarterback rating of 122.1. Look, covered Tom Brady, and he has all the Super Bowl rings.
Did you?
And he had great seasons in 07, 2010, 2011, even 2009. He had remarkable seasons. What Joe Burrow is doing, single-handedly carrying his team back to 500, a team that's not very good defensively. No. We all know that. That's been well documented. What Joe Burrow is doing is MVP worthy. Jamar Chase said it again after the game tonight. He proved it last week, Jamar said, and he did it again tonight. T. Higgins, same kind of messaging coming from T after the game. What Joe Burrow does to me under pressure is just a thing of greatness. It's just so rare in the National Football League. He makes throws on the run into tight windows, and then he lobs that ball. He made it look so easy. He made a very difficult play down the left sideline, the one to T. Higgins to set up the game winner in overtime. He made that look so easy, and it's not.
No, he's so accurate. It's obscene. It was funny. You remember an early crosser in the game, Mike, where Jamar Chase was crossing and Patrick
and it was behind him.
It was way behind. It was a horrible throw. It was like a horrifying, like, oh no, is this a Joe Knight where this is not going to work? It was like, that was ugly and awful, and it was. And so that's what's so rare about that. And then after that, it's like, yeah, he's fine. It was just a rare bad throw. It was
the next
weird to
pass,
watch.
Skinny.
Yes. 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 No,
I will
right.
bring that up, and I'll have to pardon
I'm with you. I know the play you're talking about.
Play-by-play.
No, I know. So while you're doing that, by the way, Joe was also hit, because I think you were looking for it before.
Yes.
He was also hit officially 15 times, not just 7 sacks, but hit 15 times. The good part was the 7 sacks only accounted for 28 yards and losses. Think about that, too. A quarterback who only averages -4 yards per sack loss on 7 sacks. That's rare. That kept you in at least decent down and distances. All right, did I help you out? Are you there? I know the play you're talking about.
Let's see if I can bring that play up, just because it really shows your point brilliantly. It was the first drive of the game for the Bengals.
Yep.
And it was 1st and 10. It was 2nd and 6 at the Denver 38. Joe Burrow, incomplete pass to Jamar Chase. Very next play, Joe Burrow, short pass to Jamar Chase.
Oh, yeah.
To Denver 31 for 7 yards.
Yeah, it was a tight window throw.
It was the smallest of windows.
Yeah.
And he threw an absolute seed for the completion. That just kind of shows you, well, obviously, Joe Burrow has a very short memory, and he's fearless. If he makes a bad throw or a bad decision, it doesn't impact him going forward.
No, that's a great word, because I think that's what he is fearless of. Made a bad play, made a bad throw, threw in this. He doesn't care. He's going to come back and make the throw that he thinks he needs to make. I mean, the accuracy, 39 of 49 in today's NFL. I mean, you're talking about almost 80% completions. He's up to 42 touchdowns. He became the 11th quarterback in NFL history, the 11th in NFL history tonight, to throw for 40 touchdowns in a season. Now, some of those guys, Aaron Rodgers, Brady, Breeze, have done it multiple times. But think about the history of the NFL, Michael. 11th quarterback ever to throw for 40 touchdowns in a season. And he extends his record of the whole 250 and the 3 touchdowns plus the 8 games that nobody's ever done. It's been the most absurd season. Jay Morrison, our friend, asked him on whatever day it was, Tuesday, I guess it was. We haven't asked you about the wrists in a while. And he goes, wrist feeling good. Remember the storyline of that? I was guilty of it, not guilty. I remember after the first game, like, dink and dunk against the Pats. What's the problem? This is ugly. And maybe shame on the Bengals. They maybe didn't trust it either. And maybe that's on them of they didn't trust where the wrist was. And they thought.
And they were playing the Pats, and they thought it won't take a full effort from Joe Burrow.
Right. That's a great point. And so we haven't asked him about that in a while, nor should we, because he's just slinging it around like Brett Favre never slung it around. Talk about a gunslinger. He doesn't look the part, right? Because Brett Favre's just out there, falling down half the time, throwing a 50-yard bomb. Joe is just a surgeon. It's bing, 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 bing. Oh, yeah, deep shot. Sure, I got you. Touchdown. It's ridiculous what he's done.
I want to read this quote from Joe Burrow. Finally getting a win over a winning team, first time in 8 tries this season. We know we can hang with anybody. We've proven that this year. We've played every single team close. So it's just about making the plays down the stretch to win those games. Today, we did. The last 4 weeks we have, and we've got to continue to do it. To your point earlier, Skinny, if this team can somehow miraculously find a way to get into the playoffs, I'm not saying they're going to go all the way, but they don't feel like they're going to be overwhelmed in any environment they play in. And to me, when I'm looking from the outside in, that's what I'm concerned about. Does this team go in to wherever they're going to have to go, probably Buffalo, and feel like with the way they've been playing the last 4 to 5 weeks of the season and making plays late in games, do they feel they have a chance? And I think they do.
Yeah, it's house money. On top of that, it's like, how did we get in? And here we are. And so you've handled Buffalo in the past. Not with the complete current roster, but with a chunk of this current roster. A bunch of these guys have gone to Buffalo in the snow and won. And if you go to Pittsburgh and win, I don't think Pittsburgh does much in the playoffs. I think they're sinking fast, and they can still beat the Bengals. But Baltimore has not been good in the playoffs. What's the knock on Lamar and his crew of, it's great in the regular season, Lamar can't win a big playoff game. And guess who's gone to Kansas City and stood toe-to-toe with Pat Mahomes and beaten Pat Mahomes and then lost on a last-second field goal to Pat Mahomes the last 2 times you've gone there? Once in the AFC Championship game in 22, and then obviously early this regular season. You don't think you can stand toe-to-toe with those guys? You absolutely know you can. Whether you win or not is certainly that's why you play the game. But you know you can stand toe-to-toe with those guys. I guarantee you the AFC does not want to see this team. My fear is Indy pulls the rug out from under him with a win tomorrow as we're doing this on a Saturday night, and they play at the Giants. I know Joe Flacco's quarterbacking, but if they get in, Katie bar the door, man.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you one more question.
Yep.
Joe Burrow, your MVP this year or not?
No, he is. I mean, Josh Allen has been great. Josh Allen has been a reason Buffalo is where it is, but I could also argue that, why is Buffalo not the 1 seed if Josh Allen's been that great? And, Pat Mahomes is not a reason Kansas City is where it is as the 1 seed. And at that point, I look around and go, all right, maybe Derrick Henry, maybe the addition of him, but why has Baltimore lost 5 games? Again, you could argue why has Joe Burrow lost 8 games? Joe Burrow's lost 8 games because his defense sucks. I mean, he has willed this team to – he hasn't willed this team. He has performed this team to 8 wins with a defense that's been horrible. I mean, think about all the 30-point games this team has scored and lost, right?
Yes.
And so to me – I think it's a no-brainer. I get the award. It's for a guy who leads his team to the playoffs. I do understand all of those things, but at some point you have to look and go, who's had the best season? Who was most valuable? This cat took a team that lost games 41-38, 38-33, 34-27, 35-34 on a missed 2-point conversion. This dude did those things and still got his team either in the playoffs if they do it or on the cusp. That's the MVP to me.
One more stat I'm going to leave you with, Skinny. 8 straight games of at least 24 points, extending the franchise team.
Crazy. It's
really amazing. What are you working on now?
Well, I wrote the column about T. Higgins because I thought he was just fascinating in the postgame. Like I said, he put an exclamation point on one of 2 things. The exclamation point on this was my final game as a Bengal, or this is the exclamation point of why y'all should pay me. And it'll be fascinating to see where that goes.
All right. Obviously, Skinny also has his summary and recap. I'm trying to think here.
Yeah, by the way, Mike, that was fun to write. The gamer, we all write a gamer, right? That was a lot of fun to write. I must have rewritten that lead 26 different times. And I had a tie in there. I had a loss in there. I had a win in there. I had a win in regulation in there. I was juking and jiving. I think I have Cade York's name in there as Cade York 7 different times as Cade York. As we know, as we've all written stories, when you have time to go, second reference is York who. York. I think I've got Cade York's name in there 5 different times as Cade York. So sorry for that, people, but I was trying my best at the gun.
We understand, Skinny. It was a long night for everybody, but a victorious night for the Cincinnati Bengals, keeping their season alive and keeping their slim playoff hopes alive heading into the final week of the season next week in Pittsburgh. The Bengals victorious over the Denver Broncos 30-24. Skinny will have you covered on local12.com. I have got you covered on CLNS Cincy with a Y.com, as well as all of the locker room reaction on the X at Trags, Trags, as well as not only this podcast, but locker room reaction on my YouTube page. That's youtube.com/@JungleRoarPod. He's Richard Skinner. I'm Mike Petraglia, Trags. We will talk to you after the final regular season game next weekend sometime. When the NFL decides exactly when that game's going to be played. We'll talk to you after the final regular season game, and if the Bengals catch a break, we'll certainly follow the Bengals on the road into the playoffs. We'll have to see how that turns out. But until next week, he's Richard Skinner. I'm Mike Petraglia.